Hello and welcome to the American Experiment Podcast. We are on podcast number 36. My name is Bill Walsh. I am the Director of Communications and Marketing here at Center of the American Experiment. And today we're going to talk about the child care industry. We're going to talk about home child care, home care, what do you guys get? Family care. Family child care. And I've got a couple of great guests. I've got an actual real person in the studio today, not a policy fellow, not somebody on our staff, but somebody who actually is in the business of home child care, family child care, and that is Cyndi Cunningham. And then, of course, I've got our policy fellow, our economist, Martha Njolomole, who is one of our economists who writes a lot about this industry and the economics of childcare and state government subsidies. So we're going to do two things today in the podcast. We're going to talk real life, what it's like in the field. And there's some new regulations coming down the pike. We're going to talk about how they're going to affect people in the field like Cyndi. And then also get kind of the bigger picture on policy and economics of the industry and what we're looking at from a think tank perspective. So welcome. Thanks for coming in. We're doing this offsite office hours because obviously during the day, during the weekday, you're taking care of kids. Talk about your center and what you're doing and how long you've been doing it and maybe why you got into the business in the first place. Let's start there.
Okay. Cyndi Cunningham. I've been licensed for 26 years. I got into it because I had 3 children, and not that I couldn't afford, but I wanted to stay home with my kids. Even then, there was that balance of economics. My daughter counted up, and I've enrolled over 150 kids in my program. It's in my home. I have a great space, and it's very outdoors, nature garden. We do life, I guess is what I always say. I do have 3 children that did make it to adulthood. I have been a public policy chair for the state nonprofit, so that's my side gig. Mm-hmm. I've done that for 12 years. And I am also a trainer and course writer for the state system. So I kind of hit it on all.
So a lot of people have followed your path. I mean, they have children. Maybe kid number 2 comes along and they start looking at the economics for the family and they say, maybe we should open an in-home center. And so that's kind of a very common thing in the state of Minnesota, really in the country. Right? I mean,
I would say the majority are because we have children or like children or whatever. I have a number of friends who don't have children and have chosen to go into their early childhood in their homes rather than in a school or a center. Mm-hmm.
We should talk about that from the language perspective. We're going to talk about, I'm going to get it right, family, home care.
Family child care.
Family child care. And then that would be what you think of, in the home.
Correct.
And then the other piece would be the child care centers.
Correct.
And those are the New Horizons and all the chains and all the places. And then you could also get it through the school district. Would be a third way?
There's a school district, and there's also another one that is called certified centers. I don't know if you've looked into those. And they have the least amount of regulations and often are in schools or the WISE or other community programs.
Well, great. So you're minding your own business, running your business, and the state is coming along just recently with new regulations. And can you just talk about that process? And you're obviously involved in the policy side of this.
Yes.
But just tell us what's happening right now and why we're talking about family child care.
Yeah, right now I've been involved in it since the very beginning, back in 2019 and 21 when it passed. But right now, what happened was that providers, I'd say it's a dump. We were dumped on with draft regulations, had virtually no input from providers, from stakeholders, and it's like a dream list in a lot of ways.
So back up. So who's on this? So this is legislation passed in Minnesota to create is there a working group or a committee or something?
So there was a family child care task force. And when we looked at that, we have 2 different sets of regulations. Then the idea was to meld them together and bring them up to more speed. And that was passed in 2021 to have this happen. The centers jumped on and wanted to do the same thing.
Okay. So is it 2 different tracks, one for centers, one
Correct.
For family? Okay.
2 different tracks. They look pretty similar.
And so you say it's a dream list. So where are they coming from? Where are these? I mean, there are obviously some regulations on a family child care,
yes.
right? You have to. There are safety things, there are cleanliness things, there are rules and regs already, right?
Correct. Well, and I'll say, we believe strongly in keeping kids safe. We wouldn't be in business. We wouldn't be able to take care or do anything. We believe strongly in that. This is about, we are in our homes. We are one person, and we want to look like a family. not like a center.
That's a choice that parents are making in the market.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's part of the choice.
And up until COVID, it was actually the highest choice.
So who's on this task force then?
So the task force
What kind of people?
that came before was about 25 people. It was legislators, it was nonprofits, it was child care providers. And what we were told and how it was going to happen seemed like our best way to go through to do this. We needed a consultant. One came in, NARA, which I don't know, National Association of Regulatory, I don't know what the last letter is, sorry.
Yeah.
So they were looked at, and in legislation it was a consultant, and if possible, if practical, NARA would be the consultant.
Okay, but that's the national piece. But what about, are you represented on this task force?
We were on the task force since the legislation. There has been no stakeholder input. This has all been between DHS and NARA.
So I'm confused. There's representation on the task force, but these standards are coming in, like you say, they've been kind of
The task
dumped.
force ended in 21.
Oh, I see.
Yep, sorry.
Okay.
Yep. So the task force ended when the legislation went through, and then all the legislation put it into DHS.
So they went in the workshop and they came out with this draft that we have in front of us now.
Today, I would say yes.
All right, let's get into what's in there. I think I read there. Really, if you were to dream up, you said the dream standards. So you're looking at the whole country, you're looking at national standards, and you're picking all of the good ones, and then you're saying we're going to put them all on Minnesota. So that sounds like a lot. Is that kind of where we're at? Just so many things.
There's a lot of these that aren't done even in other states.
Okay.
We don't know where they came from.
Wow.
So
Yeah, if I could
Yeah,
just
Martha.
chime in. So the name of the project was Child Care Modernization Project. So the idea is to bring us to modern times. Like they argued that nothing has changed in the past 40 years, so we need to update these standards. So that's where the idea is coming from. So this is why maybe some of those rules are not seen in other states, because they just think this is what the best practices should be.
Well, let's get into some of those. Then, Martha, you did a post this week, kind of on our website, AmericanExperiment.org. By the way, AmericanExperiment.org. You can search for all of Martha's posts very easily. But some of the examples, I mean, I'm looking at this. Okay, it used to be you got to be in a clean house. That seems kind of obvious, And there's inspections, right? Can you talk about it? Let's just look at the enforcement side a little bit. You're inspected regularly, irregularly. How?
It's a mandatory once a year,
Okay.
unannounced.
So once a year, somebody from the county maybe comes in,
Yep,
or
we have county licensors, and we're not. The states oversee the centers. The counties, it's a delegated system, and so we have licensors. And so if there's a complaint or a comment, or we have questions or whatever for licensing, and then there's an off-year visit that they have to do unannounced.
And so there's expectation, obviously, of cleanliness and safety and
Yes.
proper ratios and things like that.
Absolutely.
So they're going to come in and do the inspection. But some of this, we've gone from cleaning rules to these are the products you must use. I mean, really specific, is from what I was reading.
Right.
I mean, can you elaborate on that? I mean, what I mean.
Yeah, that's the biggest part is the detail of the prescribed. This has to be done in every single specific way, and again, without any stakeholder input. A lot of the products and stuff that they do, there have been providers. I support a lot of providers. There's a lot of people around me who are doing the detail, and some of the products that are on there aren't there. The gate, a lot of the things just aren't readily available to even what we have to do. The refrigerator cleaning and sanitizing once a year, it's kind of or once a month.
Once a month,
It's
yeah.
How do we empty our refrigerator, clean it, sanitize, and do that on that regular basis? And
I
I guess
think parents do that even.
In your own home, yeah, once a
I don't
month
think
on the
people do
refrigerator.
that.
I'm not so
Yeah.
sure what
I'm
the
not
rest. I used to
sure.
work in the restaurant industry. I'm not so sure what that one is even. But it's yeah. So it's very. The question I have, and you kind of alluded to it a few minutes ago, is what is the problem that is being solved? And
Right.
There does not seem to be foodborne industry illnesses. There's not all of these things that you would think would lead to this
New
really-
regulations, more regulations.
Well, the majority of the regulations that are the inflammatory ones are these really detailed, very specific.
Yeah, let's talk
ones.
toys. I mean, it's not just there's an expectation that there would be toys in the home child care center or home child care, but But my gosh, we're really specific about what types of blocks and dramatic play equipment, including but not limited to, and there's like 7 things they list under blocks.
Correct.
I mean, we're really micromanaging what kind of toys are in there. I mean, I don't know. That just doesn't seem like common sense. I mean,
Well, the problem with is it does not respect the children. It does not respect the providers. So children don't need necessary blocks. There's a lot of nature play at early childhood ed, right? We're talking about kids that need to play. We're talking about kids that need to be outside. We're talking about kids that there's loose parts is a big word that goes on. It's like we don't need to be prescriptive in what it is that children need to be around them in this age category to be able to learn. My kids go out and they have a mud kitchen and we're looking at bugs and we're looking at butterflies. And that, I don't know how to count those, maybe, but the blocks are not, the micromanaging of the detail.
right. I mean, you may or may not want blocks in the home. It may be a good
Or
thing.
they might be pieces of wood,
Yeah.
right? So a nature-based program would have pieces of wood rather than.
All right, another one from Martha's post, temperature. Previous providers have to keep their homes at a minimum temperature of 62 degrees. New rules require a temperature range between 68 and 82.
Yeah.
I mean, we're really micromanaging things when we're telling what temperature. And this is not food safety. This is not a commercial kitchen where food has to be at a certain temperature. These are human beings.
And they're home. There are homes, too. There
Yeah.
are families. And the energy cost and the energy saving, and where that would be a great example of where is that at anywhere that's a good thing to do, because everything Minnesota anywhere is environmentally. Let's get down on energy. Let's lower it. My basement and my upstairs have dynamically different. I'm a ranch, dynamically different temperatures. It would be impossible for me to have.
So the inspector's going to come in and go to the thermostat or bring their own, presumably, or that's going to be part of the new inspection. Is what's the temperature in the home? Yeah. So, how is this going to be received? I mean, the fear here, from my perspective, because I read Martha's writing, and we have shortages. We are in a state where there are shortages for slots, both in centers and in homes. And we've been losing home providers for many years because of all kinds of different reasons. My guess is this is likely going to tell some people that we're out. I'm not going to do this. I'll go find something else to do. We'll put our kids somewhere else. Am I accurate? I mean, will this lead to fewer slots?
I would say we've lost people right now just by the reading and the fear.
Oh.
Wow. So before we're not even done yet. Well, Martha, can you talk about let's bring Martha in on the statewide impact here. I mean, obviously, more regulations drive people out, and can you talk about? I mean, are we at crisis level in Minnesota? Would you say in terms of accessibility and slots?
Yeah, I mean, it's really puzzling to me that they're doing this, because this is an issue that parents have been complaining about like for years, right? Especially in greater Minnesota, they cannot find childcare. They have to drive like 30 minutes to go find somebody that is willing to take their child, or sometimes parents have to even contact a provider before their kid is born. Like, do you have a space for me? That's how bad it is in most places. And the thing with that is because in greater Minnesota, it's hard to run a daycare center, because you need a lot of kids for that. You need density, because you need to have a lot of kids in the center. But greater Minnesota is a little bit more sparsely populated, so it's because of that these family childcare providers are more easily available there. So families rely on mostly only family childcare providers. But then in the last couple of years, mostly because people are aging out of the industry, people are finding it hard to buy a home, but also because of the regulatory landscape has been getting pretty complex over the years. People have been getting out of the industry. So if you compare Minnesota now to like 20 years ago, we've lost about over 20,000 childcare slots, like just in greater Minnesota. And that
20,000 slots
in greater
aren't
Minnesota.
there.
Yeah, because again, these family providers are just going up because the state just keeps giving them new things every year to do and to, document or whatever.
Okay, we're going to stick with the economist. Simple supply and demand. Fewer slots what's it going to do to price, right?
Yeah, it's going to raise prices, because all of these parents are competing for the fewer slots that are available. And I think what's really concerning about this too is if you look at the greater Minnesota, in the metro region, when the family providers leave, actually, most of the times they're replaced by centers, but that doesn't happen in greater Minnesota. So not only are you not just going to have high prices, but you're most likely going to end up with no option at all for a lot of parents.
All right, keep going there. Fewer slots for childcare available in a community. If you think about what mom and dad are going through as they have children, this affects workforce. So that's the next thing it's going to affect, right? How do you if I'm running a small town, I want people to come here. I want to invite a manufacturer in, but we don't have childcare slots. That's going to really hurt jobs then next.
Yeah, this is actually a good topic right now, because the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, since last year, they started coming out with this report about companies that choose to expand out of state. So they give them a survey asking them, why are you choosing to expand in other states instead of like Minnesota? So their newest report just came out, I think, last month. And one of the reasons that businesses actually said was their reason for leaving was because they cannot find workers here because there's no childcare. So they try to go somewhere in greater Minnesota. They can't find workers because, parents don't want to go to work because they cannot leave their kid just at home. If they try to go find a center, centers are not there in greater Minnesota, and then family childcare providers are leaving the industry. So this is an issue. I think Minnesota, the last report they had, I think, had a deficit of about $13 billion in expansion. So that means companies that are originally from here are expanding in other states, but then the states that are expanding here, they're not bringing here as much as we are giving out to other states. So we are losing business investments to other states, and childcare is one of those issues, and that is actually probably going to keep getting worse.
All right, let's stay with you a little bit longer. I want to keep going down this road. So it's like this is like the circle of education funding we've done. We could do the circle of childcare funding. All right, so we go in as government, we add regulations to Cyndi's home daycare home, and then drive her out of business, and then create a crisis, and then we solve it with more money for childcare. And you've written a lot about how it sounds good, makes me feel good if I'm a legislator to vote for more money for childcare, but it actually exacerbates the problem. And that some people have a hard time understanding that, but you've kind of written a lot about that.
Yeah, so there's a couple of sides to that. So I actually, at the hearing too, a couple of people brought this up too. They're like, well, if they want us to do all of these things that they're proposing to do, they have to give us money for this, because we cannot do all of this stuff. First of all, we don't have the staff for it. We might have to hire more people. I think a lot of the senators did this a little bit too. We have to hire more people. It might take me away from take care of the kids, so I have to hire somebody for this. So they have to give us money. So the people that were, the DHS people that were, they were like, actually, yeah, we hear you. This is something we've been hearing a lot about from a lot of providers. So when we present these to the legislature, we are going to tell them that they need to give you money. So I think that's a high possibility that if these rules pass, they are going to call for a couple, maybe $100 million, or it could be $1 billion, because last year they actually passed. They gave the childcare industry about $1 billion. I'm not sure what the specifics are, but so they're going to probably
in many different ways, into like sliding fee programs that they fund for low-income people, or centers, or school-based. Yeah. But they put a lot of money into the industry.
Yeah. So a big part, I think what they did last year was the payments they gave to providers. So this might come in as a form, in that way. So again, this means taxpayers are funding something that is not even necessary, right? They are creating a problem and then asking taxpayers to foot in the bill. When again, as Cyndi said, is this even necessary?
And it works great when we have a $17.8 billion surplus, but that's not going to be forever. No, and if the state turns around and we end up with deficits, we're not going to be able to fund this. And so we'll have created the problem and won't be able to fund it at that level, and we'll just...
Yeah, we already have a budget issue this year. The budget forecast came out and they're saying, somewhere in 2026, we're seeing a rate in the budget. We had a $3 billion surplus this year. They didn't spend most of it. And the reason for that is because they have to be careful in how much they spend, because looking forward, the budget isn't looking any good. So again, you're coming up with these new mandates. That means if the money isn't there, you're likely going to have to raise taxes or something. But also, another issue, another side to this is if you're not doing anything to increase the number of childcare slots in the industry, but then you're just giving parents money, what you're doing is you're driving up the demand for it, which again raises the prices even further.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at. Yeah,
Yeah,
when you fund parents and they bring that money to the
Yeah,
center.
so you're raising prices even further, and this actually really hurts the middle class too, because the people that get these subsidies are mostly lower income people, but then the providers have to raise prices for everybody.
Let's get into that a little, because I don't understand, as an outsider, I don't
Yeah.
understand the economics of the industry. Let's say, on the one hand, you hear about parents, young parents with kids, and they're going to put the kid into child care. It becomes the largest expenditure in their family budget. It's bigger than their mortgage for many of them. We hear that all the time. Okay, so it's very expensive. Okay, and then on the other side, you're not rich. You're not getting rich doing in-home childcare. The people who work for childcare centers, my daughter worked there. She's a teacher now, but as she was going through her teaching education, she worked summers there, didn't get paid much. So we're not paying people a lot of money in this industry, and yet it's a huge expenditure. So it seems like there's a lot of money going in and not a lot of money going to wages. Where's all the money going? What am I missing on the economics of this?
That's the title of this article I have, is Who Profits from Childcare?
Okay.
Right. I have a script somewhere.
Sounds like a conspiracy.
Yeah. Well, no, it's like, and I mean, all of these things I'm writing. And one of the biggest things, I will say somewhat of a misconception, is that we're all aging out. Some of us are, have.
Yeah.
But it's because there also is not the support to stay in. And we run into, so what's actually really lost is the parent choice of mixed delivery, right? Then we're all going to be center. And that's I can't remember which city it was, came in and they got millions of dollars with Klobuchar and whatever, and it was to build a center in a school setting, right? And it's all center-based. And they don't have the wraparound care. So the dream from some people is that kids will be in school all the time from 6 weeks old.
Yeah,
And
cradle.
it's not, well, and there is a point of the cradle to grave theory, but it also is just I met with economic development people in Mankato a couple of weeks ago, and it really was from a straight economic piece, right? It was, they can't get the building, they can't get the funding to do the rest of these things. And these were just straight out economic development people. And it's a very, very complex, but people are not asking, I ask frequently, where's the money going? A lot of the money that gets passed through legislature is going through to a lot of nonprofits, going to a lot of organizations that are supposed to be boosting up our programs or finding more providers and stuff. We don't see much of that money. Like the money that we get is about $500 to $600 a month out of all of those, whatever. The certified centers, who are not regulated at all, virtually, I have a short list, are also in that pool and are getting money. One of the pieces that's going to happen and is happening is that the shift will be to unlicensed, illegal.
So it'll be like a black market, essentially.
Well, it's already there. I have one up the street from me that's not licensed, and so then we don't have any quality, we don't have any input, we don't have anything. The way that the state oversees the counties and the way the counties regulate us and license us was brought out in the OLA report in February about that was a failure, and it's not getting, so the trickle-down effect isn't getting the state. So we have 87 different ways that counties look at how we do.
Sure.
We don't ever know and this is a big problem with this is, and where the fear came from providers, we already live with the fear that we don't know if this licensor is going to say we do it this way and another licensor is going to say to do it another way. And we get dinged, we get fined, we get put on display in the internet. DHS said in a meeting, well, that's why we want to have counted blocks, because then there's no question about whatever. I don't honestly know anyone.
Wait. Counted blocks?
To count the blocks.
You lost me.
Oh, so they want to say if we put in a regulation that says you need 20 blocks.
Oh, blocks. Back to the blocks.
Yeah. If you
I'm
need
like,
20
okay.
blocks.
I'm trying to think, what are we talking about? Census blocks here? What are we talking about?
It's not going anywhere.
Okay, sorry.
So
back to the toys.
Right.
Yeah,
so if we're counting the toys and we're prescribing this detail, then the county licensors don't have a question.
They'll get more direction.
Right. Well, and then they'll know exactly what they're supposed to be looking for. And the fail in that is you could walk into multiple, there's 6,000 of us. There's probably 6,000 different ways that our programs look. Families need that option. We don't need cookie cutter. We need the options to that. Centers can't find employees.
And as a business owner, you rely on your reputation. You probably get most of your business through referrals. I mean, so if you're not providing a good service, you're not going to get new families and new kids. I mean, so we've lost caveat emptor so long ago. I mean, it's like we've got to regulate everything and take care of everybody. But back to the economics again, I was thinking like the centers. My daughter worked at a center. Is there a huge insurance cost? Are there things we don't see, or is it just the ratios that drive things up? Because we haven't talked about that yet. Minnesota has really high, provider to child ratios.
So a lot of the child care money that parents give actually goes, it's a labor cost. So I've seen some studies that estimate that about 70% of all of the tuition actually goes to paying the people that work in child care centers. So if you look at like infants, right? So in Minnesota we have a 1-to-4 ratio. So for every 4 infants, you have to have in the center.
We're talking center here.
You have to have one provider. So that means whatever money is coming in, you're dividing it among 4 people. If you look at other states, of course, the number is a little bit more flexible. So maybe you have some states that are like you can have 5. So that means you have a little bit more money to divide among the number of people that are caring for those kids. So what happens is because the number of kids is like so low, but then you need
revenue
a little
source.
So then everybody gets like a little piece of that. But then after that you have to count rent, insurance, because you have health insurance, and then the centers also provide benefits and all that. So when you add
labor is driving.
Yes, so
I'm sorry. There are owners that are taking a chunk of money out of all of that. No one ever wants to talk about that.
Okay.
All right, that might be
right. I know this is one of my angst is that there are small centers that are pretty close, 1 or 2 or 3.
Yeah.
There are large chain centers, and there are also those predictions, I can't remember what they're called, where corporations essentially will come in bigger than any small chain that we have. Yeah. And because there's profit.
There is profit.
So that's, to me, it's like no one will ever answer my question is, there is profit. Where is the profit going? And if it costs so much, and I understand the infant part of it, but that doesn't play out for us, right? It's like I can make a decent living. Am I getting rich? No. And they refused in this, they refused in this modernization to deal with the absolute number one thing we all said needed to be taken care of. October 22, they did a survey. The number one thing that needs to be taken care of is ratios. They refused to look at it.
Yeah, so getting to that though, so when you're talking about the center specifically, you have the ratio thing, but I think what especially gets dicey is that a lot of providers actually, because infants are so expensive to take care of, you don't want to charge too much, so actually providers end up charging less than what it actually
like a loss
costs
leader
them.
to get that kid early.
Lose, but then they make money on the older kids, right?
Yep.
So that is where the money comes in. But then again, even the older kids in Minnesota have high staff to child ratios. So
let's talk about that for a second. Another policy, decision Minnesota made a few years ago was to go to an all-day kindergarten, and then also the school districts are now getting that kid in some pre-kindergarten programs that are paid for by the school district at age 4. So am I get the ages right? So at about age 5, you're going to kindergarten. So your customer base is infant to 4, pretty much, right? Well, during the day, right? You can get those kids after school, obviously. But did you lose kids when the state started expanding all-day kindergarten and into pre-K?
I believe every provider, I should say majority, I probably would say.
No, I think so.
Yes, any place where there's a school pre-K, we all lose. And I live in St. Paul, and I would say it's starting to drop down to 3.
And so that puts further pressure on this because that's where you're making money on that age kid, and then boom, the state's taking them away with taxpayer dollars and putting them in the K-12 system as soon as they can, and that's hurting the economics of trying to make this work. So we keep shooting ourselves in the foot with this industry, it seems like.
Well, and also the one of the things with the school that's really lost is that there's no what's termed wraparound care. Non-school day, summers, before and after school, when a lot of those programs are put in, it's like, now what do you do with the kids? They put us out of business, programs that could do that, who have that. And we are so much more unique, as I have a kid from the moment that parent drops off in the morning, I'm still the person, we have the continuity of care that is in no other setting.
Yeah.
And so those children do not have that consistency or someone kind of like monitoring them through that whole time period.
Yeah, sometimes it looks like there's this idea to formalizing childcare, making it like K-12 really is what is, because like it's all about, there has been even a lot of focus on what do parents want, like, what kind of childcare are they looking for? Are they looking for somewhere where they just want, I don't know, love and closeness to the person taking care of them, which is where the family childcare providers come in.
Right.
Or are they looking to go to a place where from the moment they walk in, they're learning, I don't know, something, or like the whole day, which is what the centers are a little bit like. I guess it probably isn't all day.
Here's a big misconception, and there's a book. I have it over there. It's called The Great Disconnect: What We Know and What We Do with versus What We Do with Children.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody should read it.
Okay.
Because the concept of what is learning and what is education is totally misconstrued in these kiddos. And I believe that parents are doing the best they can with what they've been told and said, and I should have my kid in education, and so therefore that means school. And I'm sorry, my little kiddo that I'm loving and caring and holding and building confidence and that social, emotional, and connection, the biggest impact on kids' education is that continuity of care. And so the education that my kids get from finding that butterfly and knowing how to look for it and knowing how to decision make and problem solve and to do all those things, that's what children need to go forward in life, to be stable. I believe that is a big part of what we're seeing in a lot of our society. We're seeing, especially because of COVID, we're seeing kids totally disconnected. And so the education, the learning in my setting, we have lots of blocks. I have a lot of space, but that's not really what the learning is. The learning is their interaction with each other, with me, with the environment there, learning how to do critical thinking.
Yeah.
That's not by learning your ABCs. Kids can't learn that till they're older.
Yeah.
There's actually a lot of research on this that actually kind of goes to her point. So a lot of the regulators, they come in, they say, if you want to provide childcare effectively, you have to have a bachelor's degree in this and that and that. But then when you look at the research, it actually says what's most important, what actually determines the quality of childcare is the kind of interactions that you're having with the children. But when
Is that another difference for Minnesota? We require more degrees along with the ratio?
Yes, so if you're looking at
Get back to the centers.
The centers, yes. So they actually did something good though with these standards, because the childcare centers were complaining that they cannot find qualified workers because the standards are just crazy. Somebody actually raised this point, like if you're in one of our neighboring states, you are qualified to be a teacher, right? But then if you come here, you're only qualified to be an aide. And an aide, what they do is they cannot look after kids themselves. They have to have somebody supervising them. But then if you go to North Dakota, you're going to be a teacher. You look after kids yourselves. So what we do here, for instance, if you have like a high school diploma, you have to have about 2 years of experience and also take some post-secondary credits first to become an assistant teacher, not just a teacher, an assistant teacher. And then after that, you have to have another year of experience and more post-secondary credits to then become a teacher. They've sort of reduced those requirements a little bit down, but they're still sort of there.
What do you think is driving this? I always try to get at the motives. Everybody's got a vision to be successful for the state of Minnesota. They want families that are healthy. They want kids that are healthy. We want to get a great school system. What do you think is driving some like the ratio discussions? I mean, is it safety? Is that the overriding concern? And what's driving modernization effort in Minnesota? I mean, if you put yourself in their shoes, tried to be charitable and sometimes we can't answer that. We don't know what's driving it because we wouldn't do it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know for sure. But a lot of times when they come out with these proposals, it's always about safety, healthy, quality. I think quality is an especially big issue. They think if you have all of these standards that people have to follow everything by the book, then the childcare is going to be super high quality or something like that.
Are we chasing a problem that doesn't exist, though? I mean, do we have a safety problem in Minnesota with our child care, or even in the country, in these states that have these ratios that are much more liberal than we have here? Is there? I haven't read about a safety problem around the country.
Well, me neither. I haven't read anything, dramatic happening in like North Dakota or Wisconsin. So it's hard to say really what the issue is. I would say though, there was an issue a couple of years ago that the Star Tribune sort of talked about.
212.
Yes. So like a couple of kids I think died in family childcare provider homes. So that kind of led to
okay. Sometimes the legislature will react to a newspaper story that happens. So
I think after that,
you're smiling, Cyndi. Do you have the background on that?
Yeah, I do.
What are we are we overreacting to a newspaper story or a few incidents?
At the time, I did not. That was 12 years ago before I knew what I know now. Then the way the article was written and the stats were put out, I ended up getting through a FOIA the documentation about what the actual stats were and what children got done. Actually, what happened at the time was the counties weren't reporting to the state what was happening within the counties, and that was the shift. So then when the Star Trib came out, and then was this, oh my gosh, and then there were 34 criteria that needed to be done. I was the main testifier and worker with DHS with Jerry Kerber to bring them into something of semblance that was a practical piece. I will say a couple things, of course, is that in the misnomer of the quality is this quality and education shouldn't be in here. It's like having a restaurant that has cleaning standards and whatever else and then telling them what food they need to put, right? That was the one that came to my head today. But it's also that centers, as a family child care provider, I am a trainer, I'm a course writer. There's a system of course approvals and who gets to write them and who gets to get them. And all of family child care trainings have to be taken through that system. They have to be all approved, done, gone, recorded on these systems. The centers create their own trainings. They create there's some trainings they have to do for parent aware, but other than that, the directors or other staff people create the trainings, deliver the trainings, and there is no record about what's in the training. No one scrutinizes or checks.
So they just have to have training. Show that you're doing training.
Yes. Yeah. And like for the employees, like for your daughter, it's often not recorded on this developed. So if they go work someplace else, their record of training doesn't go anywhere with them. So there's a really misconception about in my perspective, that the level, and that's in here too, where we have to have only one training every 5 years. It's like we have to retake some training, SUIDS, HD, and some other things. We have to take those every year. There's quality in repeating trainings. Sure. But centers don't have to do any of this.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Okay, so that's not there. And
is that because they have bigger, better lobbyists?
Maybe.
I mean, that tends to be we hang around the Capitol a lot. That happens a lot, and there's an industry behind it, and they've got the ability to hire lobbyists.
All of this is in 9502 and 9503, the actual rules. And that's when people talk about 40 years, that's what's not been changed. It's not all the rest of this. So all of that was laid out there. And the intent was that those things would all get re-looked at in a combined, collaborative way, not this level.
So where do we go from here? So these draft regulations are out. There's been some public meetings around the state. There's some ability for input. What should people do? How do people help? What can we do to weigh in? You're with an organization of home providers. So are you guys mobilizing? What's the next steps and what can we do?
I'm going to put out one here, though, on this whole thing of the failed before we go further. That's making it a problem. They won't even translate the documents and the information to the major languages.
That's very odd because they translate everything.
Correct. I have the documentation. They can't be translated. I actually went and trained a Latino group on how to read it. And it was fun because we had interpretation going at the whole time. Yeah. So as far as where we're at now is trying to fix those things. There is a survey for the draft.
Okay.
We are highly recommending people do that because it's the only thing that's going to have data-driven
impact. Yeah.
Thank you. Empirical data
that
goes with it.
So the parents can do this? Everybody can weigh in?
Everybody can do that. There's 3 basic questions. They keep saying, just do the ones you want. We're saying, do every single one of them. Do them all.
What's the website? How do they find that?
It is on the...
So I actually put the website on a blog post I wrote. I'll be writing a couple more blogs pointing people to, the website, telling them to comment. Tell the DHS that this is going to have some very unintended negative consequences for the childcare industry. I would just like to add too, so when you're looking at the childcare centers, right? Washington, D.C. right now is the most expensive place for childcare centers. And the reason for that is because they have also some of the most stringent regulations. So Minnesota is also up there. So when you're looking at like 2022, if you have an infant, you were paying about $17,000 like for the whole year to send your kid to daycare center. But that's just like the statewide cost. If you go to the metro, that was even higher. Greater Minnesota may be a little bit lower. Right now, the number...
If you can find a slot.
Yeah, if you can find it. And right now, the number is about I think the cost is about $20,000 a year. So that's, if you're looking at the median household income, that's about 20% of your money just going to childcare. If you're looking at a single parent household, it's even worse. It's about half of your income going to childcare. If you're married, it's a little bit better, but again, the numbers are just, they don't look good for us. So if they do this, if they pass these rules, what they're going to do is drive out the more affordable option of childcare, and then they're going to leave parents, having to pay $20,000-$30,000 if they have like 2 kids in the daycare center. So everybody needs to know.
And then come behind and subsidize it with the
Yes,
government. It's
of
more
course.
government. That is, if you were not charitable, you would say that is the motive. I mean, is it control? Is it we want everybody in the system sooner so we can take care of them. The state is your family. We're gonna raise the kids our way. So
the high cost too is really clear, and I bring it up. High cost of care and low wage is centers.
Right.
It's not family child care. Okay. Clearly, no one. I might have a family of 3 that whatever, and I can make a decent living. I control that. I'm a small. The really weird piece is that we are one of the largest small business, women-owned industries anywhere, and we can't get...
We should be celebrating that and affirming that and
the
try
rest
to
of
grow
it
that, making it easier for people to come into that business.
Correct. And we've tried to get the SBA, and we've tried to get other, business. I've talked about economic development since about 2015 about this is what needs to happen, but I also run my job. The other thing our organization is doing, besides telling everybody to get the draft done and to do it, is we are doing a petition to have this delayed.
Okay.
So DHS's intent is to take the input, work with NARA to come up with a legislative proposal.
For 2025?
For 2025.
Okay.
And no one gets to have input on that proposal until the session. And the key person on this used to be a legislator, and either it's an intent that they know this is going to fail and we can't do anything, or they just think this is going to work. It's not a level playing field by any. We tried to get one specific DHS CPR first aid regulation change. Took us a year, and we didn't know it was passed until yesterday.
Wow.
And it was one line of an expiration of when we need to take it. That's not, and we worked hard on that, right? That's not a level playing field to try to figure this out. So what we're asking for is stop, don't go through it, redo the legislation, change some of the wording that's in the current legislation, set it back at minimum a year so it's a policy year instead of a budget year. And then also we've proposed plans to bring in the stakeholder, which we can use the draft. I don't like the draft, but we've spent a few million trying to get to this point. I don't know. I've heard different numbers for the budget that's been there. So we've invested this. It's the money, So let's go through the draft. Use that as a starting point to meet. There's providers that have been meeting in groups, meeting with their locals, besides all of the open forum meetings. Family child care providers are doing what we've always done. Dig in, work it, and go. So a lot of that work will have been done. And so then we can start working with DHS. We have a preference to not be working with NARA, and just work with DHS and a consultant, and then essentially do a reset. And then if we can come up with some agreement, something that's actually manageable and solving the problems that are there.
Sure.
And then potentially then into 26 during policy year. I'd like to think if we can't get it done, they'd set it back another year or two, but that might be dreaming.
You want them to be thoughtful. You haven't spent a lot of time at the Capitol, I think. But I'm kidding. Maybe not as much as
12
I have.
years.
Maybe not as much as I have.
No, I think we've got a
lot.
lot of times when we first came out with this, people are like, "Whoa, can't happen!" And as people are listening and doing, it's seeing more and more. So DHS
how do
can bring it, but they just
you
don't
have
have
a petition.
to
You said to
Yep.
try. Who's that going to? DHS?
Well, it's shifting as of Monday.
Okay. How can people sign that then?
Yeah, I can get you the link. We've started an online one that's going to open up Monday.
Well, hopefully in post, as they say, I'm looking over at our producer. They could put that in post and have that on the screen so people can.
Yep. So it'll be an online. It's going to the
millions of people watch this podcast every week. I'm kidding.
I know. I'll take 20. So Tiki Brown is the new commissioner for the new Children's and Families. I get all the letters wrong. And then also the Inspector General, who is in charge of this department. Kalani Moti are the two.
Try to pause. Not force it in the 2025 session. Eventually, this is going to be a legislative issue, so people can talk to their legislators, both on the pause maybe and also just on the policy of it. But you're doing great work fighting for families and the business and children, and in an industry that we seem to be just keep shooting ourselves in the foot over and over and over. Again, I can't figure out why if it's not for these nefarious control and budget issues. So thanks for coming in and talking to us. It's great to get people from the real world to help us understand things. And Martha, as always, you add so much as our economist. Thanks for listening, everybody. That's the American Experiment Podcast.